I'll just record this whilst you're here. We're going to talk about the pressure being into that left foot a lot more, to the tune of 55%. And as you start to rotate around, we'll let the bottom half free up a little bit. We've talked a lot about the wrist angle on the left-hand screen.
Yep.
We're going to talk a lot more about being able to see a lot more daylight in your between your knees there.
Yep.
Because you're going to rotate that a little bit further. The body shape's not too bad there. You don't really create enough up here by the report, obviously, because that bottom half isn't going around enough in its own right. And then we'll talk about that shaft coming down quite steeply, quite vertical this way, when eventually we want it down through there, and your hand path will change to in there as well, because your right hip's not in the way. And we'll get you working into out, for want of a better term. And of course then we have to slow the body down, and that's where this comes into it. You've started a weight at the end of a golf club there with no brakes on it on the right hand screen there, and because of the path being so vertical on the left hand screen, we're going to see that breakdown in leverage there. Yeah. And then when we start to put driver in your hand, it's even worse again. Okay. So then we also talked about this wedge being so far back in his stance, even though it doesn't feel like that.
Well, I was deliberately starting with my wedge back.
Okay.
Edge of centre.
All right.
Because I was told that was the right thing to do.
Sure. So now we know that the low point is underneath that left armpit. We certainly want to hit down on it, but we probably don't want it back there. We only want it just there.
Yeah.
Okay. And for all those reasons what we talked about, with the golf club face being open and the angle of attack being far too steep. So essentially, that's where the golf club's bottoming out up here. We can still hit down on it, but just not that far back in your stance, because then you're going to have to sort of try and unload that power source, so unload your wrists and leverage, and your body's going to go backwards to try and get it to, and that's even worse than where your 7-iron was.
Yeah.
Because it's so far back in your stance.
Yeah.
Okay. So then that motor pattern, your brain's starting to go, well, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to do the 7-iron? Do you want me to do the wedge? What do you want me to do? Whereas if we only move the ball position a couple of inches,
Yep.
well then it's still got the opportunity to still hit some pretty good golf shots because of the shorter shaft and the vertical angle it's coming down. You can even see that's a lot steeper than the 7-iron was before. Okay.
So if I were to go to the driving range and hit 150 balls now,
Yes.
I'd just hit all 150 with that closed stance, just to try and
Shallow
that
everything
feeling
out.
into my
Yeah.
head.
Yep. Absolutely.
Well, if
No
they're
question.
going straight anyway, do I just keep doing that? When do I come back and try and?
You'll start to get the feeling of when you can and can't do that.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. To be brutally honest, given as we get older, internal rotation of your hips doesn't get too much better. It gets worse. So in other words, if I turn that foot out even more, that'll give you even more internal rotation of your hip. That's why I've taken it back, a foot behind you in that drill, to then give you more internal rotation. So then all of a sudden we can start to actually rotate your hips rather than you trying to force it. Now when you rotate your hips a bit more, you rotate the upper half a lot more, which then gives us a shaft plane that will come down through here rather than coming down vertically that way.
Yep.
Okay. So if we go through and have a look at some of these that you're still not trusting at this point in time for good reason, we've artificially created it, but we've got more depth through here. We've still got that cup wrist, that's why you're still hitting it out to the right. Not too worried about that, but have a look how much more your shoulders have turned without you thinking about it, just because we've given you the rotation in your lower half.
Yeah.
Okay, so then all of a sudden the shaft plane comes in shallower. So now instead of that shaft plane coming in from there where it was before, it's coming in, there. And that's a huge change in a short period of time. Now, get the club face squared up and we start to see some pretty cool stuff happening. And then you can unleash the fury as much as you want. Okay. Good job.